Exactly. In fact, I've coined an expression in the book that CEO, the acronym CEO, really stands for change equals opportunity, because change is inevitable. And some of it's going to be good, a lot of it's going to be really bad, but it's irrelevant because you can't control what's out there.
It's going to change no matter what.
Exactly. What you can control is how you react to change, how you respond to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you turn that into an opportunity and you say good, even if it feels bad at the time, then you'll be able to control your own response. And that so often separates winners from losers.
Welcome to the Matthews Mentality Podcast. I'm excited to have Jim Keys, a global business leader, philanthropist, educator, artist, musician, commercial pilot. That's how you got here. You yourself here, right?
I did.
That's pretty cool. And modern Renaissance man. What do I have to do to call myself a Renaissance man one day? I mean, I'm not an artist. I'm not a musician. I'm not a pilot. Certainly not an educator in a traditional sense. I got a lot of things I got to work on.
No, here's the trick. You just do a lot of things. You don't have to be good in any of them.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you should talk to my wife. She'd tell you I do a lot of things and none of them good. But he's a former CEO of 2 internationally recognized Fortune 500 companies. If you have spent any time in this country, you're going to know these names. 7-Eleven, a personal favorite of mine, where he implemented new retail systems technology that improved product assortment decisions, and Blockbuster Inc. Man, I had so many good experiences as a kid at Blockbuster, where he helped acquire MovieLink. He recently wrote a book, Education is Freedom, a book that provides the what, why, and how of learning. He's got it. If you're watching, you can see the book. We're going to talk about it. His other business interests cover a broad range of industries, including retail, consumer products, technology, new space, energy, and advanced nuclear. He sits on several public company boards and serves as a board advisor to a venture capital firm and a number of startup companies. Welcome, Jim, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
How do I get on some boards? I need a board gig. I show up, 3-4 times a year. You get a little salary. Like, how do you get board seats? Does someone call you up one day and just say, hey?
It's a search. There's a whole search firm process where they seek out board candidates. Yeah.
So there's brokers who broker board seats?
Sure. Well, the big search firms, have a board practice that literally goes out and finds people that are qualified for boards. Yeah.
All right, man.
Don't be fooled. It's a lot of work.
To do it right. That's what they train you to say, so nobody knows the gig, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So speaking of boards and all that, like what's keeping you busy nowadays? What are you doing?
Boards.
Yeah.
No, I've only got a couple of public boards that I get involved in, and I do a lot of advisory work. And for the last year, I've really focused on this book. It took a couple of years to write it. I started it post-pandemic, or sort of during the pandemic.
Sure.
When we all had a little time on our hands, and I was frankly, I'm surprised at the response. So I've been all over the world.
So one of the questions I want to ask is, like, what compels you to write a book? Do you wake up one day, or is this something that over the course of your life you said, one day I might want to do this? Like, what happened? How did it come about?
It was really peer pressure. I started a foundation by the same name about 20 years ago when I was at 7-Eleven.
Okay.
And we reached out into schools and said, this is crazy. This is American. We've got kids saying there's no opportunity. I don't have the American dream. Meanwhile, I'm running 7-Eleven. I've got people coming in from all over the world with $500 in their pocket and becoming very successful. Yeah.
Sure.
As franchisees, as store managers. So we said, let's just go into the public school system and show these kids a path to success. And we did that. It's been wildly successful as a 501c3 nonprofit. And then some of the people who helped me start it, Stedman Graham, a longtime friend, wrote the
foreword. I was going to say, I feel like I've heard that name.
Yeah, he's
kind of a big deal.
He's kind of a big deal, and he's written like 12 books. So Stedman was really on me. And candidly, Oprah from the beginning, when I started this foundation, said, "Look, this is a worldwide movement. You really need to get this message that education is freedom out to the world." So for 20 years, we've been working on a nonprofit in the Texas market, but we haven't taken it to the world. So this is my effort to take this concept of education being the primary tool for empowerment everywhere.
Yeah, and I think part of it you cover in the book is why, in your opinion, do you think, I'm generalizing here, kids on average in America don't believe it might be the land of opportunity more? Yet immigrants come here and they're like, well, this place is amazing. I got $500 maybe, and they, again, on average, do very well.
Yeah, we are told often what we can do and what we can't do. And I was one of those kids. I grew up in small town Massachusetts, and the expectation of me was zero. It was, you'll grow up and do what the rest of us do. You work in a factory, or you'll work at the local gas station or something. And no, college is not for you. It's for them. It's for the people that can afford it, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really hard for an individual to break that stereotype. Now, it doesn't matter where you grow up. You grew up in Compton. Our friend Doc
Yeah.
grew up, and well, he didn't actually grow up in Compton,
but no, I understand.
same idea.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's the way I like to describe it in the book is, you're put in a box, and you're put there by others, but there is no box.
Especially in the communities you're talking about, is like inner city communities,
Exactly.
and respectfully, very poor rural communities, which might have been more your experience. But yeah, it seems that there is a prevailing sentiment, and to your point, might be taught to kids like, hey, all of those other things, that's for them. Like, you're just going to do this and that's it. And you're kind of put into a box or pigeonholed. And
Exactly.
And the whole point of the book is like, that's not true.
Exactly. In fact, I did a thing with, to your point, it doesn't matter if you grew up in the projects or in the trailer park. And I did a talk with Russell Simmons one time at Yale. So here we are, me and Russell sitting there at Yale. We'll look at each other like, dude,
how'd you get here?
How'd we get here? Yeah. And we both told the story from the projects or the trailer park. It doesn't matter. We both had to get out of that mindset that others were telling us who we were and what we could do. And we were both successful in doing it.
Well, I agree. And I think, to answer partly your question of speaking for both you and Russell, if I may, like how you got here is like a lot of hard work. A lot of hard work. And so that's what certainly we'll cover that today. But you touched on where you grew up. So let's time travel back in time. Talk to the audience about, where did you grow up? What was it like? I know the answers to the question, but I want them to hear it from you. Like, tell me about your childhood.
Yeah, it's easy to say, oh, poor kid, grew up in a 3-room house shack. Basically, it was something my dad had built, thinking that they would expand, and they never got around to having the money to put in indoor plumbing or heat or anything. So, yeah, we had no running water. We had an outhouse and 6 kids living in 3 rooms. And
6 kids.
Yeah, I literally grew up until I was 6, until I was 5. My bedroom was the living room on the pull-out couch with mom and dad.
Yeah.
All the kids were in the one bedroom that we had. Yeah, it was like, and then my mother had enough of that by the time, I was 5. She bailed. She went uptown to the trailer park and kind of left. And so I stayed there at that house until it got condemned. So, I can go on and on about these stories.
Well, I might ask you to, if you don't mind, and, whatever you're comfortable sharing. So your mom dips out when you're 5.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, how'd that day go? Was she like, hey, everybody, I'm out? Or did she just disappear? Like, what happened?
No, it's pretty catastrophic. It was just the typical, I don't want to make it feel like I'm alone here. This is very typical of households all over the world. There was a problem. It was, in our case, it was money. It was the conditions we were living in. She had had enough. She started seeing some other guy. My dad finds out about it, challenges her. Big fight, boom, she's gone. And, as a 5-year-old kid, your whole world gets turned upside down. But, the lesson here is that, and what I've come to learn, that adversity, that challenge that I had, while you think your world is toast at that point, it turned out that built a resilience in me and a self-sufficiency in me that I couldn't have had if I had things pretty comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So, I look back on that time and I think, well, yeah, it was catastrophic, but I probably wouldn't be where I am today, but for that crisis.
I personally agree. I haven't been through something like that, so I can't speak to it the way you can. Certainly adversity, it's kind of a weird way life works, is like our biggest moments of growth, and by growth I mean like just positive development, typically come in the most significant moments of anguish and pain, certainly emotional and mental pain. You said you were one of six?
One of six.
And
yeah.
where are you in the birth order?
The last.
Oh, you're the last.
Yeah.
Okay. And so without, again, you don't have to speak specifics, but like you have 5 siblings. Do they see that the same way? Do they like, man, while that was tough, that was great for us, and I'm so glad it happened because I wouldn't be. Did you all respond the same?
No, not at all. And again, it's probably an advantage being the last because you get to learn from your siblings, from those who came before. So I saw their reaction in often a negative sense. It was a little bit of I have one brother that suffers from a victim mentality. It's like the world's against me, the world's against us. And he believed all that stuff he was hearing on the outside. Another brother did fine. He was a truck driver, did well for himself, but struggled, really had a hard time because he didn't have the power of knowledge of education to give him optionality, to give him what I call in the book freedom.
Mm-hmm. Why? And you touched on it. Maybe some of it is just birth order. And at 5, you can kind of see your siblings like, okay, they've gone this way in terms of how they've responded or how they view what happened. Again, pretty traumatic. And it hasn't worked out. Maybe I'll go the other way. What else do you think, and I'm going to lead you here, maybe gave you the ability to respond in ultimately in a way that ultimately created a more positive outcome? Do you think we're on mentality and mindset? Were you just born that way? Like, again, these are my words, like mentally tougher, or however you want to just describe it. Like, what else went into you responding so differently?
Yeah, I don't think, I have the same DNA as my brothers and sisters, so I don't think that there's anything innate that made me different. What I do think is and maybe it was being the last of the siblings, I think I had the advantage of probably having more adversity than they had in their life. And I had no safety net whatsoever. So they at least, grew up in a somewhat stable environment, a little disruptive, a little bit poor, but they didn't have the crisis that I faced. So what I figured out is that adversity made me realize I don't have a safety net. I have to turn to whatever I can. And my dad and my mom both used to say, whatever it is, we don't know how to tell you how to succeed. But somewhere in those books, it's all about education, because the more you learn, the more you can do. And it's something they can't take away from you. They can take your car, they can take your money, they can take your house. They did. But they can't take what you learn. And so they imparted that knowledge on me, which was really a gift. And I ended up diving into knowledge. I didn't know how, I didn't know why. But then the reinforcement I got from teachers, from schools, the more I learned, the more I would get rewarded for my hard work and studying. Right?
Kind of became like a self-fulfilling prophecy to a degree.
It did.
I was driving with my son the other day, and we were talking about school and why grades are important. Every kid's going to ask the question, and I heard this from someone else, so I just parrot the line: is if you have a career or a job that pays you from the neck down, like in terms of physical manual labor, it's going to be pretty much a wage job. But like the jobs and the careers and the professions that really, from a creation of wealth, that probably pay in a way that a young kid would like, it's really from the neck up, right? And which is your mind,
right?
And so I said, think about that, and think about building strength here. Not just strength here, and I always thought, it always stuck with me, is like jobs from the neck down pay less than jobs from the neck up.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to touch on is, and we're going to go through the career, I mentioned it in the bio, but it sounds like your mom was frustrated with your dad from a providing standpoint, from a earning money standpoint. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, and it's very typical. I think he just had different expectations of what was success. He didn't really care. His definition of success was to have the freedom to do what he wanted to do. So while he had to work hard, he wasn't striving. He wasn't on that hamster trail trying to strive for a fancy house. He just didn't matter to him. Now, to my mom, it mattered a lot more. And, looking back, you can think it's pretty hard for a woman to grow up or to live in conditions without running water, without a bathtub. I didn't have a bath until I was 12 years old. It's hard to even imagine. But
what do you think? Yeah, do you think you, as a small child, and then developing, saying, okay, I'm sure you had time to process, at least at the time, in your opinion, why mom left, or why it didn't work out. Do you think that was partly a driver that led to so much of your success? So you said, hey, I'm never going to be in a position where someone's like, hey, you aren't providing enough?
yeah, it was possibly some of that. I think what it gave me, though, is a recognition that change is going to happen, that you can't control it. The macro environment's going to change. And I had so much change in my life, whether it was being disrupted. As I said, they condemned our home. I had to move again. And
Why'd they condemn it?
because it was, inhabitable, basically.
okay.
Yeah, my dad ended up getting cancer. The town nurses had to come care for him. They were coming down to this house, and I'm like,
And they said,
dude, you don't even have proper facilities here. We can't take care of him. And it was a bit of a fire trap, too, because we literally had cardboard boxes instead of drywall on the walls of this house. And, it is what it is.
And this is in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah.
It gets cold in the winter.
It gets really
What
cold.
was that like?
Well, we had a wood-burning stove, so it was actually pretty toasty as long as the wood-burning stove
But it's
was
also
full.
a fire trap, right?
Oh, yeah, big time. Big time. And then the wood-burning stove would burn out in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And,
Who had to put more logs on the fire?
thankfully, my older brothers. I was
Okay.
young enough that I didn't have to do a whole lot of that at 5 or 6,
What? So your dad got cancer. How old were you?
I was probably 8 or 9 when he was diagnosed.
And he
then-
eventually passed.
Yeah, when I was 12. Yeah.
Okay, so your mom leaves at 5. Your dad passes at 12. What happens after that?
Yeah, then I'd get bounced around a little bit with a brother, lived with a brother for a while. Good part of that is I learned how to drive a trailer truck because he was the truck driver.
Yeah.
And that helped me in my part-time job search for a while. And then I ended up back with my mom.
Okay.
She recognized the trailer park wasn't a great place to raise a young boy, and so good or bad, she moved in with a gentleman who had a home, a bit of a home, and that ended up, while it was well intended, sometimes it doesn't work out so well for the kid or the guy, because he wasn't very happy about that arrangement.
Sure.
Of course. So yeah, that led to more change, more challenges.
If you're comfortable, what were some of the challenges of that?
Yeah, little things. Literally, I would go to sleep at night afraid he was going to kill me in my sleep. I mean, it was
I define that as a little challenge.
a little bit of a
little
challenge,
bit.
yeah. And today, I guess the guy probably would have been diagnosed with a bipolar disease or something, but he was just volatile, just really volatile. And he was a tough factory working guy. And I was getting older. I was
Drinking?
No, alcohol was never a problem. It was just temper, but I was an athlete, like
Yeah.
you, playing football, playing baseball, and by the time I get, to the point that I'm 15, 16 years old, I wasn't going to put up with
No,
what he
I was gonna say, yeah.
doing to my mom or to me. So it all came to a head finally, and he tried to take his own life at one point. And you imagine at 15 years old having to drag this guy out of his car in a smoke-filled garage when he's trying to take his own life, and lay him out in the snow and try to resuscitate him.
You're a good guy. I think a lot and people would have just opened the door and been like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna let.
good luck. Bye now.
Sounds like he wasn't the best guy ever.
Yeah, but you know what? And here's the irony. My mom ended up passing when she was like 60, early 60s. And she said, will you take care of him? And so I actually cared for this guy until he was like 95 years old. He lived forever.
They need to put a statue of you somewhere. St. Jim.
Yeah.
You're a good
think so.
man.
Well, I don't know, but it was hard.
Did he ever, was there ever, gosh, what's the word, reconciliation? Was there ever, if nothing else, acknowledgement from him that, no?
Nah, it was just ignore it. Just pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
And
Guys do that on average,
guys
but
do
especially
that.
that generation.
yeah. But thankfully that caused her to move out. So then finally, we were on our own, and it worked out. But again, you look at all these things that I had to deal with, and it's easy to say, oh yeah, it's easy for him to say adversity equals opportunity and strength and all that stuff. But here's what I've discovered, because I'm out talking to people like you who
Sure.
grew up in a very different environment. In many ways, you had more adversity than me.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, no, but think about it. The pressure, some of the friends that I had growing up, going to college, they came from very wealthy families. They had very successful parents. The pressure on them to succeed far exceeded the pressure on me.
That you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that too is a form of adversity. And those friends of mine either used that challenge and excelled because they created their own identity and got out of that shadow, or some of them suffered from it. And the learning there is the same, that we all have adversity. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be poverty. It can be a completely different form of adversity. It might be being bullied in school. It might be having very wealthy parents with very high expectations.
Or who've achieved tremendous success, and then for right or for wrong, you feel you have to live up to that to some degree.
Exactly. So the question is, how do you respond? Because it's in your hands. That's why the subtitle of my book is "The Future is in Your Hands," and that's what I'm trying to impart to everybody, that your identity is you. It doesn't matter how you grew up. It doesn't matter who you grew up with. Your identity is your own, and your future's in your hands to be able to say, "Hey, I'm gonna take this form of adversity, whatever it is, and I'm gonna use it as my superpower."
That's great. Have you ever, and to piggyback on what you're saying, you ever heard of it was a Navy SEALs team's commander, Jocko Willink?
I have.
Yeah, he does. There's a lot of hype videos on the internet. He wrote a book, Extreme Ownership, which kind of touches on just anything that happens in your life, especially adversity. Like, you're actually in control. It's on you, and you take ownership of everything. But he also made a great video. It's just called Good, and it's like 3 minutes, and he just goes through all of these things that could happen quickly, bad to you, and no matter what it is, just say good. He's like, okay, got fired, good. Like, now I know what I have to do to get better. Didn't get the promotion, good. Like, didn't get the starting job, good. Didn't get the whatever it is, or I'm not. Mom left, good. Okay, now I'm gonna. And it's a very quick, efficient way to help you reframe how you look at something that doesn't happen in a way that you would probably choose for it to.
Exactly. In fact, I've coined an expression in the book that CEO, the acronym CEO, really stands for change equals opportunity, because change is inevitable. And some of it's going to be good, a lot of it's going to be really bad, but it's irrelevant because you can't control what's out there.
It's going to change no matter what.
Exactly. What you can control is how you react to change, how you respond to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you turn that into an opportunity and you say good, even if it feels bad at the time, then you'll be able to control your own response. And that so often separates winners from losers.
So let's talk about, as a kid, responding to adversity, responding to change in a good way, in a productive way. Walk us through, like, kind of in teenage years. You mentioned you're an athlete, right? So that you also, we had a great dinner last night. You were talking about working at McDonald's. That was your first job?
Yeah.
Just kind of tell us what you did to start, planting the early seeds of putting yourself in a different position than, the family you grew up in.
Yeah, it's part of that advantage. If you are able to say good, if you're able to say, this is a bad situation, I better take matters in my own hands, then you approach everything with a completely different attitude. And I did that in school, and I use the example of what happens to kids when they raise their hand, right? I know to the teacher, they get the spitball in the back of the head. That happens all the time. And many kids then don't raise their hand. I instead said, fire away. I need this. You got a home to go back to. I have to do this on my own. So yeah, I'm going to keep raising my hand. And then
You just get spitballs in the back of the head.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know if kids do that anymore.
yeah, I
think
don't know. I don't know if they do. Is there
Yeah.
such thing as a spitball anymore? But
we
were
we've
pretty good at it.
Yeah, that's for sure. But like, in the pursuit of sensitivity, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But they have eliminated a lot of the adversity for children. It seems
Yeah.
like on average.
It's probably good. Yeah.
Yeah, probably good.
Until
But,
someone walks in with an AR.
Yeah.
then it kind of
Yeah.
comes to a head sometimes. But
So were you the kid in class who just was raising your hand all the time?
yeah,
Straight A student?
I was that kid, and not straight A's, but I worked really hard.
You worked
And
really hard?
To your point, I wasn't smarter than anybody else. A lot of my buddies were a lot smarter. They didn't have to work that hard. I knew I had to overcompensate, and I did. And that carried over into the work world. So, we talked about it last night. My first job at McDonald's flipping burgers, I'm not going to just flip burgers. I'm going to be the fastest, the best burger flipper that ever was. So I got in there and just worked at it and learned how to be good at it. Even picking up the lot.
So picking up trash?
Picking up trash. Yeah, McDonald's wants you to clear, a quarter mile each way down the road. So what I would do, since I was playing ball anyway and I needed a workout, I would run around the parking lot. It was a way to get in a little exercise. And the people I was working for would see me do this and say, this guy's a demon, man. He's just what a great attitude. You'd ask him to go clean the lot and he runs. And it got me a promotion. By 16 years old, I was a shift manager. They gave me the night shift, probably because nobody else wanted to work it.
I'm about to say, what were you making back then?
$1.25 an hour.
Let's go.
Yeah. I think I got a 10 cent
McDonald's
raise
gave
as
you
a-
opportunity, though. Wasn't that the line back in the day, or am I thinking of Dave Chappelle? No? All right. There was a slogan, but they gave you your first job. You worked in high school.
Yeah.
When you weren't going to school playing ball.
Yeah.
Talk to us about college. Where'd you go?
Yeah, I ended up with again, not knowing how to apply to college, where to go, how to go. I didn't know how in the world I was going to afford it.
Didn't have a guidance counselor?
Well, my guidance counselor literally said, Jim, you can't afford it. And it wasn't that you're not smart enough, because my grades were pretty good at the time, but he said, just,
Was there not student debt available the way there was today?
No, not the
Or is
way we
today?
don't have the endowments. I mean, today Harvard's endowment is what, $100 billion or something crazy.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the endowments. They didn't have the scholarship support that we have today. And ironically, people complain about the price of college today. Well, it was, it was $10,000 a year.
Which inflation adjusted is probably more than today, right?
Yeah, $50,000-$60,000 a year. So it's not really
Yeah,
that.
okay, so-
But there wasn't the scholarship support that there is today. So arguably, college isn't that much more expensive. It's a bit of a narrative and a myth out there.
So what'd you do?
Well, I doubled down on work. I started driving a truck. I mentioned my brother was a trailer truck driver, so he taught me how to drive a rig, and I started driving a produce truck in addition to working at McDonald's. So I don't know how I pulled this all off. Playing sports, studying.
How many would you
keeping
sleep?
grades up.
3 hours a night?
About that, yeah. I would literally, and a lot of this was during the summer. So
Okay.
I'd work the night shift at McDonald's. I'd get up. I'd sleep for 4 hours, 3-4 hours. Get up, load my truck, make 2 runs, come
Are
back.
you one of those guys who just doesn't have to sleep, or would you like try and sneak in naps throughout the day?
I tried sneaking some naps from
Yeah.
time to time, yeah. But I was also I had pretty high energy back then, so
Good man.
yeah. But it worked, and I was able to pay for virtually my whole undergraduate with very little scholarship.
Where'd you go to school?
Holy Cross.
Holy Cross.
It
Was
was-
it close to home?
It was close, and that way I could avoid room and board and just pay for the tuition.
And where were you living by then?
At that point,
You had upgraded from a condemned house to a slightly less condemned house?
yeah, my mom bought a little duplex. She was able to, with her factory job, was able to buy a small duplex, and literally it was 3 rooms again, but we turned like a living room into a small bedroom and
To a rental?
and used the other side as a rental. That helped her.
And so your mom
pay
was
for the
working by then?
Yeah.
Was that common at the time?
Yeah,
Maybe
not
in your-
as common, but in her case, she had to. Even when she was, with my dad, she was working as a waitress or part time in a factory. But yeah, she, to her credit, she was really hardworking. So
How'd you do in college?
I did well. I did well. Again, I head down, do whatever you need to do. Um, I decided to give up on my football career because it was taking too much time, and I probably wasn't
Yeah,
going to make
football
it anyway.
does that.
Yeah, it really does. I could have been great though.
No doubt. I tell myself that every day.
Yeah.
If I had only put in the work. No, I meant we talked about it last night.
Yeah, we did.
It's a
We
great
did.
sport to play, but the transition for especially my teammates from being an athlete to just being because I would say nobody's normal, everybody's special, but being in a more traditional work environment, it can be tough.
But for the listeners who have young kids, or for the young people that are listening that are playing sports, the one thing we talked about last night, you and I both had this work ethic that if we're on the football field, we're going to work. We're gonna. In my case, as I mentioned, coach says run laps. I'm going to be first. I'm going to kill myself to get out to the front of the pack at least. And what I didn't know, and I wish I knew back then, is the importance of learning the game. I studied in school, but I never studied baseball. I never studied football. Had some coaches who would give me tips on hitting or batting or, running a proper pattern. But I wish now I had done the mental part
Didn't
of
have
the game.
YouTube back then.
Didn't have YouTube. I know. There's so many more resources today.
I tell players, I coach the 8th grade team down the street here at the prep school, and I said, there's a difference between being fast and playing fast.
Yeah.
I said to be fast is it's a 40-yard dash, and that's important. And go speed train, strengthen your legs, work on your form. But there is a difference between being fast and playing fast. And playing fast is 100% mental. It is your preparation before the game. And I don't mean just like, hey, I watch film every day. No, I mean it's nonstop consuming information by way of watching film and studying your opponent, to where when they come out, and they come out in 21 personnel, 2 receivers to the wide side of the field, you're like, oh, I know 78% of the time they run this play. So the second the ball's snapped, I can just effectively take a shot and break on it. And yeah, someone else might be a 4-4 guy, I might be a 4-6, but I can actually get to the spot quicker because I can make a decision immediately while they have to read and react.
Exactly.
So it's a big difference between being fast and playing fast.
I know you're a Brady fan, and I use Tom Brady in the book as an example because I've got a whole chapter on confidence. And, as you know, confidence is such a big part of sports.
It is. Yeah.
Such a big part. I just went to the Texas State Fair, and I threw 2 footballs through the little tiny basket, and they were like, oh, man, dude, how'd this old guy do
still
that?
got it.
Still got it. But I knew I walk up there, I know I can do it. I just had to focus and have the confidence to put that ball through the hoop. And I knew I could, so I did. And that translates so much into into sports, but into your life as well. So I use Tom Brady as an example because that's throwing the football to win a prize at a fair is not a good example. But what Tom Brady would do is prepare for every game. He would watch those game tapes. So when he walked on that field, you might think, wow, boy, that guy's pretty arrogant. No, he was prepared. And have you ever heard of Harvey McKay?
Yeah.
Okay, so Harvey, I've been blessed to know some amazing people. And Harvey was one of my mentors in writing the book. He was like, here's what you got to say. And I was with him one day, and I said, hey, I'm writing this book on confidence, and I'm talking about Tom Brady and sports, and I said, what's your definition of confidence? And he goes, I'll give you the gift that I've put in all 12 of my best-selling books. He said, here it is, 3 words, prepare to win. I'm like, okay, I'm prepared. What do I have to do? He said, no, that's it. Prepare to win. He said, confidence is all about preparation, and the reason Tom Brady is so damn good is he is prepared. He is probably more prepared than any other player on that field, and that preparation gives him the confidence so that when he steps up at that critical point in a game, his head's at the right place.
No doubt.
Because he knows he's prepared.
And it's nice before the game not having as much anxiety. Because I talk to my kids more so about school, and they're like, Dad, I'm nervous for this test. And I said, it doesn't mean this is 100% the reason, but typically your nerves, it's really your stomach telling you, it's your body telling you that you probably haven't done as much as you could have, and you know that. I said, if you've given everything in terms of preparing for the test, it doesn't mean that you have no nerves. but it likely is less so. And as you get older and respectfully more mature and you have more experience, it develops into confidence where you go into the test or you go into the game like, I'm ready. Like, there's no way these guys have prepared as much as I have. And so that's one of the best, is alleviating the nerves and anxiety of failure, because when you prepare so much, it doesn't mean you can't fail, but the probabilities are lower.
Exactly. Yeah. And that effort to help define confidence, that effort to help define confidence, and the desire to understand what makes people confident, and more importantly, what makes people lose confidence, caused me to write a whole chapter on fear. Because, in fact, if there's one common theme in the book, you'll find that I talk a lot about fear being the enemy of success for an individual, for a sports team, for a corporation. It's this thing that creeps in. It's that insecurity, that imposter syndrome, whether you're on the playing field or in the boardroom, that creeps in and causes behaviors. It causes really negative reactions to change. And so back to what we talked about, when something happens, macro environment, is fear going to take over your reaction, or is your preparation and your confidence going to lead you to respond in an appropriate way, in a winning way?
Jim, in your experience or your opinion, how do you develop confidence? Certainly one thing we've touched on a huge amount is preparation, right?
Right.
But if I'm a listener, and whether I'm an athlete, okay, but put to the side, I think 99% of our audience is necessarily an athlete first,
right.
But really more so a professional. And whether it's a big pitch, or you're going for the promotion, or you're going for a job interview, whatever it is, my guess is a lot of people suffer from a lack of confidence, whether they try and show it or not. Like, so what advice would you have based on your experience and or in your opinion to develop the confidence that allows them to metaphorically play fast?
So I think you've got to go back to neuroscience. And I tried to research a little bit of what is it that causes this fear, that causes people to be insecure. And I started to understand a little bit about the brain, and I am not a brain scientist, so I have to caution you not to take this too seriously. Yeah, I could be. I have the confidence that all I have to do is learn, but I learned that in the brain there's a thing called the amygdala, and it's our worst enemy. The amygdala is that portion of the brain that goes all the way back to caveman brain days that protected us from getting eaten by a natural predator. We don't have natural predators today, and yet the fight or flight reaction that gets triggered by the chemicals in that portion of our brain, the amygdala, shows up today in the boardroom or on the playing field, and it causes reaction to events that take away our ability to reason, to use the prefrontal cortex. So I've characterized it in the book. I tried to dumb it down for me. I have to simplify things for myself, so it doesn't sound too scientific. I call that the caveman brain. In the caveman brain, that fight or flight response to change is what we have to control. The contrast I use is the aviator brain. As I'm a pilot. I just came from Wichita, Kansas, where I spent 3 days in a simulator with them trying to kill me. They're throwing engine fires, cutting an engine on takeoff.
Did they succeed?
Aspen. They didn't kill me, no. They didn't
If
kill
you
me.
said yes, I'm not getting on.
Yeah, no, they weren't successful. They tried out wind shear, all kinds of nasty things. But when you're in one of those situations, you don't want to trigger that caveman brain, because if the pilot responds in that way, if they fight, they'll over-control the airplane, stress the wings, and tear a wing off. If they flight, that means they're going to look at the co-pilot and say, I don't know, what do you do? And you have to be able to defeat fear in the cockpit. So what do? What they train you to do is reach for that knowledge. It's called the Emergency Procedures Checklist. Whether you're an astronaut, a pilot, military pilot, civilian pilot, that Emergency Procedures Checklist represents knowledge. And knowledge is the antidote to fear. So when I'm up there and I have a crisis, I turn to the information, I pull it out and say, oh, okay, dual engine flame out. Step one. step 2, step 3. And now I'm solving a problem with information, with facts, rather than letting my emotion and my fear take over. That, I believe, is a way that all of us can trigger our aviator brain and be able to learn to recognize when our caveman brain's kicking in the boardroom situations, or we're reacting, we're getting angry about things, et cetera, et cetera. That's manageable, but we have to train ourselves.
Yeah, keep that resting heart rate low.
Yeah, exactly.
When you were in college, okay, so you're at Holy Cross, then what happens? Do you go into the workforce directly, or do you go, I know you ended up getting your MBA, did that happen right away? Walk us through that sequence.
Well, my direction, a lot of people encourage kids to focus and decide what they want to be early. I'm not a big believer of that, because I think most of us don't have any idea. We haven't got any world experience at all. So I thought, well, the best thing I could be is first maybe a doctor. And then I realized, I'm not crazy about blood and stuff. Maybe I wouldn't be a good doctor. And then I decided, well, okay, I'll be a lawyer. Then I can wear a business suit. I can wear a suit every day, and that's a profession. But I had no idea that there was something called business. To me, business was the factory my dad worked at, and I wanted no part of that. I thought businesses were all run by rich people who, started factories. Literally such a limited worldview. I had a professor, thankfully, in college who talked me into, he learned that I was going to go to law school. He said, you're going to make a terrible lawyer. Do me a favor. At least get something called a JD MBA. It's a joint degree. Do it in 4 years instead of 3. Go that path. And literally that advice caused me to apply to Columbia University, which was one of the first schools that offered that combined degree. And by some miracle, they let me in.
They let you in?
Yeah. The business school first. The law school waitlisted me. So I started at the business school and ended up with an internship in the summer with a major oil company, and they offered me a full-time job, and I was starving to death, so I took the job and never looked back.
How'd you do in college?
I did pretty well. I wasn't stellar, but I think I had a 3.8 or something like that.
Disciplined, serious.
Yeah. I mean, I was playing baseball, but
in college?
Yeah,
okay.
But so I had some outside activity, but most of what I was doing was a combination of work.
Were you playing for the school or just playing?
Yeah, I was playing for the school.
Oh, okay.
Just for a couple of years. Then I had a scholarship to go to England. You'll appreciate this, being an athlete. I get to England, and I'm like, well, I want to play. I want to learn to play soccer. Kid, and I was a terrible soccer player.
Yeah.
Because I had never played as a kid. But they brought me out to play cricket. Now, I'm pretty good with a bat, right? I was hitting like 370 in high school, and I can hit. And I'm thinking, but this bat's this big, right?
Yeah, it's different.
And they're gonna bounce the ball before I get to hit it. This is easy. And they brought me to tryouts, and I started hitting sixes, which is, you hit outside this big circle that you're in the middle of, you get 6 runs. And I'm sitting there going, I'm swinging away. I'm thinking, what a great game. I hit a foul ball, and I get 6 runs.
Yeah, it's a different game.
It's a different game. But I actually made the team, believe it or not. It shows you the power of confidence, because I went in very, very confident. And then they made the massive mistake of trying to teach me to properly defend a wicket and stand up there and kind of...
And it messed you up?
Oh, totally messed me up. But what messed me up more is when I came back to the United States and tried to play my senior year at college.
The baseball?
I could not hit a curveball anymore. I was done.
Well, all right. With your baseball career now over,
yeah,
you graduate with a JD from Columbia.
MBA.
Okay. And then you went to work for an oil company.
I did.
What was the oil company?
Gulf Oil, one of the big 7 sisters at the time.
Yeah.
And they were going through a lot of crisis at the time. So shortly after I joined, I had a job working for the chief financial officer. Just as computers came out, so I'm sitting there with a PC. Everybody thought I was a genius.
Yeah.
Well, because the company was still using, their systems department was still using punch cards back then. I'm starting to date myself.
Old school.
Now. Old school. So I had this PC. Apple had just launched, their first personal computer, and the people thought I was a genius because I was using this device, basically. So my career took off. I was doing great. And then Gulf merged with Chevron.
Okay.
And
Where was your work? Was it in Massachusetts? Pittsburgh. Okay.
Yeah, I thought they were going to send me to Houston. I had done an internship in Houston, Texas, and I thought I was going to get to go back to Texas, and they sent me to Pittsburgh. But it turned out to be a great experience.
And so, how long were you there?
A couple years with Gulf, and no, maybe 5 years with Gulf Oil. They ultimately did send me to Texas, and then I had an opportunity to join 7-Eleven. They had just acquired an oil company because they were putting gasoline at all their stores and needed a steady supply of product and a brand. So they bought Citgo Petroleum, and that was my introduction to 7-Eleven.
And that's how you got to 7-Eleven?
Yeah.
What when you entered that company, what was your title?
I was the head of strategic planning because, again, I wasn't a genius. I wasn't a strategic planning expert, but I had tools. And first of all, I had an MBA that a lot of people in retail didn't have. So I had an academic tool set, but I also had the power of this personal computer and the ability to crunch numbers and to do analyses.
You look like
fast.
you were like the whiz kid.
I was like the whiz kid.
You're like this Ivy Leaguer.
Yeah.
Silver spoon.
Oh, yeah.
And like because if they didn't know your story, right?
No, that's exactly right.
So you were
I cleaned up well.
What was your and it's gonna be generalized here, like when you first were at Gulf Oil, and then even when you got to 7-Eleven, what was your average week look like from a work hours, from a day's work, like work-life balance, all that fun stuff?
Well, I had no work-life balance. In fact, like you, I set out, and you and I had a chance to discuss this at dinner last night, and your approach to show up, be the earliest at the office and the last to leave. I did this as an intern. And, of course, I got the spitballs in the back of the head. Yeah. It's a metaphor, but it's
because you make
same
people
thing.
look bad, and that's on them, but they don't feel that, yeah.
Exactly. But I was able to tune that out. In an interesting story, I discovered this first when I went to work for one summer in the factory my dad had worked at. And they had this thing called piecework, where the more you make, the more you earn. And I'm trying to make money for college, so I'm busting my butt. Well, I ended up in a big fight.
I'm about to say, the factory workers are going to beat you up.
They were, they tried to beat me up, and I, being a kid, defended myself and end up in this big fight, end up in the general manager's office, and I learned the lesson that, people don't want to work that hard on average. It was a great lesson, and I was the outlier, so they didn't like me, they didn't want me there, and ultimately I didn't fit in that factory environment. I understood very well why my dad felt that it didn't provide him the freedom that he needed. He was trapped in that world of complacency, right? White-collar job, first white-collar job, same thing. My internship. I'm just an intern, but I'm showing up early and I'm leaving late, and the full-timers are going, "Kid, you're working too hard." I thought,
making us look bad.
Dude, what is this? This is I got a suit and tie on now.
Most humans are calorie savers.
But what a great opportunity for those of us who are willing to put the time in.
I tell my kids all the time.
Screaming opportunity.
Listen, I said sometimes people will make it easy. I remember that happened to me. An iteration of that again. Nobody was trying to beat me up. Early in my career, thank God. But I was bigger than most of them. But they'd be like, "Hey, you're making us look bad." And I just remember I said, "I'm not making you look bad. You're making yourself look bad."
Yeah.
I said, "Nothing I do affects you."
Yeah.
I said, "So if you feel you look bad, it's because that's a choice you're making. You're making yourself look bad." Okay.
Yep.
And they still didn't like me,
but it's that external noise that you got to block out.
Yeah, it's tough, especially as humans. Kind of evolutionary biology is you really needed to stay in a tribe to survive.
Exactly.
And so your tribe can be many things. It could be the people around you on a factory floor. It could be the people around you in an office, or obviously your friends and family. More of a choice there on the friend side. But yeah, it's tough to go against your instinct, which is to not not put yourself in a position to be kicked out of the tribe, because for 70,000 years that probably meant death for us. But
right.
But in today's society, it's you got to go against the prevailing sentiment sometimes.
Yep.
As it relates to work ethic, for sure.
No, exactly. I was just in Australia, and they have a concept that they call the tallest poppy syndrome. And apparently in a poppy field, well, I don't think we have poppy fields here, but in Australia they do. And well, the tallest one tends to get lopped off. And they call that the poppy syndrome, the tallest poppy syndrome, and that to be an entrepreneur and to be successful in business, you've got to defeat that fear of being lopped off.
Yeah, is poppy where they get opium
Yeah,
from?
I think so. Yeah.
They probably got some fields in California. I'm sure.
Yeah, they
I'm
might.
sure they've legalized that. If they haven't, it's on the way.
Probably.
You know. But yeah, no, the metaphor makes sense. So, all right. So you're kind of in a very traditional sense. You're climbing the corporate ladder. You end up at 7-Eleven, and real quick, walk us through how you go from your first role, head of strategic planning, to the CEO. Like what was that time period? In your humble opinion, what did you do to earn that opportunity?
Yeah, it was only I say only, but 15 years from start to finish to be able to become CEO.
You know, 15 years nowadays, college grads, they're like, yeah, I want to retire in 15 years.
Yeah, I know.
It's a different expectation.
It's a bit different, but in a Fortune 500 company, that was a pretty good trajectory. But it took being that tallest poppy. It took being willing to stand out. And here was...
And not getting your head lopped off.
And not getting your head lopped. But I didn't care. And that's the thing. My safety net was this sense of confidence that if I do the right things here, and if I'm making decisions based on data, and I'm working as hard as I can and as smart as I can, then if they still fire me for that, I'm in the wrong place. So that notion that let them fire me really propelled me to other opportunities. And there's one other really important thing. I never stayed in my box. You know, there's an expression, thinking outside the box. What box? Whose box is it? And stay in your lane or stay in your box in a corporate environment. Why? The corporation needs people who will be entrepreneurs. So I called myself a corporate entrepreneur. I said, you know, I'm going to stand up and take whatever roles are needed in this company. And if I don't understand how to do something, I'm going to go learn. So literally, we went through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy with 7-Eleven. A lot of people forget that in 1991. We had to cut a lot of expenses because we were no longer running as a big, public company with 10 jets, 10 corporate jets and all this stuff. And I literally sent a note to the CEO and said, here's what we have to do. And I outlined $50, $60, $70 million worth of efficiencies that could be gained. We came out of that bankruptcy, and I ended up being head of strategic planning for the whole company and then ultimately CFO because I was willing to step up.
Interesting. It's you hear that saying, think outside the box, and you're right, it is cliche now, and understandably so. I to your point, like you argue, you should think outside the box, but again, what box? Just think freely, think creatively, but sometimes say, hey, listen, I love that you want to think outside the box. That's great. Why don't you try working outside the box? Like
exactly.
The box is most people work this much. Why don't you work more than that? Work outside the box. The thinking will come. But, sometimes I remind people, I said, like, listen, if you want to get ahead, you want to be successful, you want to climb the ladder, you want to be the best, whatever it is, like, don't just think outside the box, work outside the box.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
and it sounds like you were doing that. You were working very hard. What time would you get in the office? What time would you leave? Did you work weekends?
Oh, yeah. I was one of the first to be there and last to leave.
And personal life, how did you balance, work and your personal life?
Well, this is one of the challenges, and when I do talk to young people today, I say, look, I did err on the side of no work-life balance, and I do recommend some. You have 4 children, but I never had children, and part of it was that work-life balance. I woke up at 40, and said, hey, wait, probably time to start, and it was a little too late. But it's a trade-off, like anything else. If I had it to do again, I probably would have balanced a little more in my younger years. But I was pretty driven. And
were there opportunities where you met someone, but you're like, hey, it's not the right time for me, or like where you consciously said, I'm not in the mindset to be in a relationship right now?
Yeah, for a long time. I finally, I've only been married once. We've been married for 30 years, but I was in my 30s, mid-30s, before I even was willing to allow myself to go down that path.
And so, yeah, it does seem that, especially in today's day and age, again, generalizing, but I think I'm right. I think most people agree that there is a significant, while there's a lot of talk about work-life balance, I think they're meaning more like balancing your daily activities with different things other than work. But there definitely appears to be like, I'm going to focus from my career for the first 10, 15 years, and then I'll think about a family. And then it seems to me, and we have lots of friends and family who've, kind of gone down that track. And then, sometimes it doesn't, even if you meet the right person, it doesn't necessarily happen the way you want. And, kids can be a challenge. And was that somewhat your story?
Yeah, that was totally my story. It was one of those things when we finally did get married, it was a little bit too late. I pushed it. In fact, we had a 6-year engagement because I was in the middle of work, and I just didn't.
Man, God bless her. She stuck with you.
Yeah,
huh?
I know.
That's a patient woman.
Yeah, it is. Part of the reason we're still married.
Jeez, 6 years.
Yeah.
Man, you're a good salesman. How'd you pull that off?
Yeah, that was tough.
There's
But
a lot
but life gets in the way, and that's kind of what happened. It was, we're going through a bankruptcy, a restructuring, this, that, and I was like, man, I've just got to stay focused right now. We'll get to it. But what was important, and probably the reason I am still married today, is that I saw this person as a partner who understood. You're in this together, and I think that's important for everybody.
Yeah, no doubt. They are, especially if it's the right one. So, what was it like, the process of getting the CEO role earning the CEO role at 7-Eleven? Was it a whole process they ran that you applied for? Was it multiple interviews, or did they just call you one day and say, hey, come to our office, we want to talk to you about something?
No, I had, over the years, been in virtually every role. So, as I said, we had gone through a lot of crisis. That change that we went through, whether it was a leveraged buyout and the company loaded up with a lot of debt and needed a different kind of management, a bankruptcy that we went through, a rebuilding of the company, all these different phases. And rather than stay in my lane, I would move from an operating role into a finance role, back into an operating role. So I ended up being, as we talked about, head of strategic planning, chief financial officer, running the gasoline operations for the company, becoming chief operating officer, running the marketing function. And then finally, I was chief operating officer, really the number 2 to the CEO. So I had the advantage of having training wheels, if you will, for about 5 years before becoming CEO, and had sat in virtually every chair. So when it came time to name a new CEO, I probably had more background in every aspect of the company than anybody else.
How did that feel the first day as CEO when you sat in the chair? What was that? Was it a culmination of life's work? Was there affirmation, or did it feel, I guess, less fulfilling than you thought it would? Like, I mean, you made it by definition success to the top of the business world.
Yeah, there's about 30 seconds worth of, wow, I made it. And then you realize you're kind of the dog that caught the car. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my gosh.
What happens now?
Yeah, now what do I do? And a little, I am human. I talk about change. I talk about confidence, but a little imposter syndrome steeps in, and you have doubts. And thankfully, I realized early in my career as CEO that this is just the beginning. I've got to keep learning and keep growing as a leader. So I've kind of adopted a leadership principle that there is no leadership principle. It's about adapting and continuing to change and learn, and that's what leadership ends up being about. So that helped propel my tenure as CEO.
How many employees on average, and how many locations did 7-Eleven have when you were the CEO? Just rough estimate.
Yeah, they've got a lot now. They've got 80,000 now. I think we probably had 40,000 worldwide, something like
40,000.
Yeah.
Employees?
400,000 employees.
400,000.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a bit of a challenge.
And certainly a guy like you knew everyone by name, right?
Oh, of course,
all 400,000.
Oh yeah.
That's
Hey, Sam.
That's got to be wild though to be in charge of a company that big.
Yeah, it's a challenge. The people challenge is real, but I actually took a lesson from Sam Walton.
Mm-hmm.
When Sam Walton built Walmart, he recognized that the more people you have and the bigger the organization, the more difficult it is to communicate. I've described it, I think, in the book as a game of telephone. Remember, as kids, you sit around, you whisper.
And by the time it gets back around, the message has changed.
Exactly. That's business. And so I had like 12 layers of management. When I first started, there were like 14 layers of management between the CEO and the store manager. And that's 12, 13, 14 chances of miscommunication. It's going to happen. So what Sam used to do is get all of his field people, literally fly them into Bentonville.
And they just heard directly from
every
him.
Saturday. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Heard directly from Sam Walton. Here are the 3 things I want you to work on this week. And then next Saturday they'd come in and do the same thing. So I knew it wasn't really practical for 7-Eleven. We had so many people in so many stores, but I was one of the first to use telecommunications. We first started with telephone conferences once a week, and then we did video conferences once a week. And now, of course, I'm sure they're doing Zoom.
Sure.
But we were able to get everybody on the same page. I took that same approach at Blockbuster to be able to, get everybody to understand what we're trying to accomplish, both this week on a sort of micro level and then on a macro level. Here's where we're going.
And you were in the role for 5 years, and then it had a big liquidity event, big sale. Like what? Just walk through the thought behind that.
Well, first of all, we had been building for a long time. We went from 10 years of negative sales when we filed for bankruptcy to then we came out of it, restructured the business, had 10 years of positive same-store sales using technology as a way to better understand the product assortment and satisfy the customer. And we had a big, big improvement in earnings, as you might imagine. And during my tenure as CEO, the stock went from $3.50, $4 to I think it was $37.50 when we ultimately sold. So
not a mathematician, but that sounds pretty good.
it was a pretty good equity day, yeah. And the reason that we ended up selling in the year 2005 is that the Chinese market came into play. The Beijing government actually came to Dallas to meet with me to say, we'd like 500 stores in Beijing for the Olympics when they were putting the Olympics
And then they
up.
said, here's the CCP official who's going to be your business partner.
Yes, yeah, 25%. Exactly.
Was that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's less than the 50% the government takes here. Right?
oh yeah, it was.
Or
it
that's
was
pre-tax.
But the interesting thing is they came to ask us. So many U.S. companies were begging for the privilege of going into China, and they came to ask us to come. The challenge I had running a U.S. public company is that I also had some really good licensees in Asia. President's Chain Store Group in Taiwan. We had CP 7-Eleven in Thailand. We had Lotte Group in Korea. These were fabulous licensees who all wanted to develop that Chinese market. Well, 7-Eleven Japan also wanted the Chinese market. And they were the leading licensee at the time, also a big shareholder. Since they're a big shareholder, I had to be very delicate about can't just give it to them. So they ultimately bought the company, and a large part of the motivation was to be able to have the right then to do whatever they wanted in the Asian market.
Without digressing too much, how did that work out for them? Like the buying the company to effectively to have the exclusive right to enter the world's biggest country by population and probably the biggest convenience market.
Yeah, it worked very well. I mean, they've now very successfully developed the Chinese market. Still huge upside potential. Most recently, they've had a Canadian company, Couche-Tard, the owners of Circle K, made a run on them. But the Japanese government very recently have declared 7-Eleven to be a national treasure. Which is an interesting way to sort of block any acquisition from a third party.
Yeah, what is a U.S. country? It's like a strategic industry, or like where certain
the U.S. Steel, that kind of thing. Yeah,
interesting. All right, so you sell. Is that the big liquidity event for you personally?
It was. I had 21 years with the company and building equity the whole time. That's why I'm obviously a proponent of saying, you're never going to make money on salary. It's all about the equity at some point.
What was that like? I mean, did you get a wire, or did you I guess what I'm saying, what went through your head when the sale closed? And again, I'm sure you did very well before that, but really, probably there was a moment where you said, okay, like I probably never have to work again, financially.
Yeah, it was especially coming from where I came from.
Humble means.
Yeah, it was a pretty surreal experience, realizing that you do have wealth for the first time. I had heard about people that are wealth management professionals.
You said, what is that?
What are they doing? And all of a sudden they're knocking on my door. Yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience. But I also I have come to learn it really isn't about the money. Lifestyle doesn't change that much, and what's really what I think the pursuit is, and that's really the essence of my book. Education is freedom. It's not education is making a lot of money. Education is wealth. Money is just an enabler. It helps.
It definitely does. Speaking of education, you got all this money. How did you know what to do with it?
I didn't. I still don't.
Should have bought the Cowboys. You would have won more Super Bowls than Jerry.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I remember when Jerry bought the Cowboys, and
he got a good deal.
Yeah, he got a really good.
He's
deal.
done okay.
He's done very well.
But so, all right. What happens? I'm going to jump forward here. So you retire in 2005 from 7-Eleven, and then 2007, you get offered the position of chairman CEO of Blockbuster.
I didn't get offered the position. I was trying to buy the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you have a good track record, as I did at 7-Eleven, the private equity guys were banging the door down, basically saying, "Hey, partner with us."
And you're the hired gun operating CEO that they put in and create efficiency.
That's what they wanted to do, and I said, "No, I'd rather than be a hired gun. I'd rather take on my own opportunity. Let me go find something, and you guys can come in and help me fund it." And so I was looking around at opportunities, and the two that were on my radar screen were Radio Shack and Blockbuster. And it sounds a little crazy, but at the time, Apple had just created the Apple Store. And Apple figured out a new formula for retail with not a lot of inventory on the floor. But here's what we sell. And by the way, here's a Genius bar to be able to help you use it. And so it was hardware and software and solutions, right? Pretty simple formula. I looked at Radio Shack and said, well, they got the hardware. They're the largest retailer of cell phones in the country and PCs at the time. And I looked at Blockbuster and said, well, they've got the software, because the biggest thing people use these devices for is content. So if I bang Blockbuster and Radio Shack together, we're going to have a convenience store, if you will, a small box store with a little Genius bar in every one that helps people if they have a BlackBerry and a Dell computer and a Sony TV. They can
tie them all together. Go one-stop shop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Make it convenient for people that they don't have to be in that.
Yeah, vertically integrated. It's
Exactly.
I love how Steve Jobs was a genius to call it a Genius bar, because who doesn't want to go talk to a genius, especially about things like computers and electronics, which can be a little over the head of the layman like myself, where you're like, man, I could go to this store and I could talk to geniuses.
It was genius.
Right. Yeah. He was the ultimate marketer. So is that how you ended up in the role? You kind of raised capital by way of some private equity LPs, and
yeah, I was literally on the road show. I had two decks in my briefcase: a Radio Shack deck and a Blockbuster deck, and I was in one investor pitching Radio Shack about this transformation idea, and he said, "Yeah, too bad you couldn't do that for Blockbuster." Because he was an investor in both. And I pulled out the Blockbuster
and you said,
deck.
well, actually, how big of a acquisition was that?
It would have been a reasonably sized acquisition, a couple $2 billion. It wouldn't have been crazy in cost to do. Actually, I think it may have been less than $1 billion at the time, given the market cap of Blockbuster. But when I was in this gentleman's office pulling out both decks, he picked up the phone and called Carl Icahn, who was the largest shareholder of Blockbuster at the time. He said, "Carl, you gotta listen to this guy." And 20 minutes later, I'm in Carl's office.
Oh, wow.
And he's listening to this pitch, and he's like, "Who the hell do you think you are, anyway?"
How'd it go?
It was a little weird, but at the end of the day, he liked it, and he said, "All right, Keys," he said, "I'm the operating guy. I'm the financial guy. You're an operating guy. Trust me, public, private doesn't make any difference." And technically, he was right. Now, had we had a crystal ball in that room and saw that in 18 months, Lehman Brothers would
Yeah, the
melt
GFC
down,
was coming.
yeah, I would have refinanced the debt, $1 billion worth of debt at the time, plus whatever it took to acquire the company. We would have refinanced that cash with private equity at about 5.5%, 6% interest and never looked back when the financial crisis hit. However, we kept it a public company, made huge progress, doubled the earnings, bought a streaming video company, great positioning versus Netflix, and then Lehman collapses, and Moody's declares us a potential liquidity risk.
And then it was downhill after that.
Then I had to pivot from, I'm going to transform this company into a streaming video, digital opportunity, to now I got to figure out how to save this company, refinance the balance sheet, and keep it alive.
And how did that go?
It was challenging. It was challenging.
Took some years off your life?
It took a couple years off my life. Yeah, I learned a lot. I quote Nelson Mandela, "I never lose. I win or I learn." And I learned a ton in that 5 or 6 year period trying to save Blockbuster from liquidation, because the debt holders were hell-bent to just liquidate it because the value of the inventory was pretty high. You could sell DVDs back then for $5 each.
Sure.
And the debt was cheap, so they could have, flipped it for a quick $300-400 million, and that was their strategy. Now, my strategy was to partner with Google, AT&T, Dish Network, somebody that could
so
be a good
don't throw the
partner.
baby out with the bathwater, right?
Exactly.
And so ultimately, what ended up happening there?
Ultimately, we were forced into a bankruptcy, primarily because the studios panicked and cut our credit terms from 90-day credit terms to cash. You can imagine what that does to a business. That forced our hand. We had to file, but we had strategic partners still. Dish Network stayed at the table. I had Korea Telecom also in bankruptcy court, helping us restructure the company so that then they could take it forward and be the distribution partner that would make Blockbuster On Demand and the stores viable into the future.
So there certainly were factors outside of your control, the biggest, which is just the GFC, and then ultimately, creditors changing your line of credit terms. Perhaps, some of your partners just not seeing it through in a way, in terms of a direction strategically that you wanted to go. But let me ask you this question, like, I don't know if this is the first time in your professional life, like not necessarily adversity, but dealing with like a failure relative to what you wanted to do. Like how was that? How did you take that? How was that on you? Like what were you going through at the time?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that happened. I had an article come out in the New York Post, a half page, with the headline was "Blockbusted." And here I am, half-page color picture of me in front of a Blockbuster sign with a Pinocchio nose.
No.
Because I had been saying, we're not going to file for bankruptcy. We had no need. We were a liquidity machine, basically. With 90-day credit terms, you'd rent a DVD for $12 or buy it for $12 and rent it 20 times before you ever had to pay for it, right? That's not a company that has a liquidity problem. But we did have this debt hanging out there. So I'm out there trying to forestall a bankruptcy, keep it from happening, and I'm saying we're not going to file. The rumor mill started that we were going to file, and I started getting attacked in the press.
Well, and again, it's not like you're lying, but what are you going to say? Like, oh, we might, or we could, like, because that would only actually accelerate what eventually happened.
Exactly.
Right?
It's a really difficult role that a CEO sometimes has to play. So, but my lesson in that whole experience is, it wasn't personal. It wasn't about me. It was, you've got parties out there that have a different objective. and they're fighting for what they want, and I was fighting for the strategic solution. And it wasn't personal. It's kind of war at that point. You can't take it personally, and if you let it become personal, that will trigger that caveman reaction. You'll start
that
fighting.
primal instinct.
Exactly. So I stayed the course, had the confidence, saw it through, ignored all the noise on the outside, and we were successful in being able to get it restructured and sold.
You still remember the name of the author or put the Pinocchio article up?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I know
wow,
it was the New York Post.
Oh, then you
I didn't
really
care
let
who
it
wrote
go,
it.
man.
Yeah.
I'd have a picture of that guy or gal up. It's like on the wall.
Yeah.
They're keeping receipts.
Let it go.
How'd Carl Icahn? How was he to work with throughout that?
I loved working with Carl. He was a very, very different guy, but incredibly smart. He had a different strategy for Blockbuster. He was on the side of, we're just gonna let this thing die and make some money on the inventory.
Yeah.
And I respected that. That was fine. I chose a different path.
Mm-hmm.
He and I had that conversation. He respected my decision. I respected his. We ended up in bankruptcy court at 2 a.m. in the Southern District of New York. I beat him.
Oh, yeah?
And he walked out, dropped a couple F-bombs on me, and the next day I was in his office with a bottle of scotch saying, hey,
Did he drink with you?
Yeah.
All right, good man.
Yeah,
Good
no,
man.
we were fine. And that's Carl. It's not personal for him.
It's just business.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he respected that in me, that, hey, I was going to go my own path. No hard feelings. This is not personal. And, I have a lot of respect for him.
So throughout your corporate climb and really later, when you were in the C-suite, you mentioned earlier, you established the Education is Freedom Foundation, right? And there's a group, I think a group of corporate leaders who joined you with that. After Blockbuster, did that become your primary focus? Like what I define as philanthropy, you can, expand upon that, but was that kind of where you turned your attention after?
It was a big part of my life at that point, and I don't want to get soppy, but to whom much is given, much is expected, right? And we grew up with that, and I've been really, really blessed with an amazing adventure called this career journey that I've had, and I've been fortunate to have some equity, events that put me in a position to be able to give back. And there's nothing better than when I run into someone on the street in an airplane, and they come up to me and say, Jim, I wouldn't have gone to school. I don't know what I would have done. No one in my family has been successful. I was part of your program, or most recently, I read your book, and it changed my life. And man, I got to tell you, that's a better feeling than any amount of equity, payday you can get.
Yeah, and your book is titled "Education is Freedom," but I think philosophically you've always said education allows you to be free, right?
Yeah.
Can you define free for the audience in your opinion? Like, what do you mean by free? Do you mean financially free? Do you mean like free of certain types of feelings?
Yeah, it's all of the above. I mean, literally, my dad used to say, I don't know what to tell you, but it's not about the money. It's about the ability to do what you want, where you want, when you want it.
Freedom of options or optionality.
Yeah. To be able to choose, what you wish to do with your life. Maybe it's philanthropy. Maybe it's just go fishing, and that's fine.
I like to fish.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it full time. But
No.
But yeah, it's that freedom, and so many of us get caught, and I've been there in my career. You get caught on the hamster wheel, right? And it's all about the next bonus or the next pay raise, and I got to have money to do this or to do that. But it's really ultimately about having flexibility in your life to do those things you want to do. And money doesn't necessarily give you that happiness.
And so walk me through today, like in terms of the foundation, like what is your primary focus? Like where is it applied? Are there certain markets you're in? Is there certain programs that we could direct the audience to?
Yeah, the foundation itself is educationisfreedom.org, and it is still mostly in the Texas markets and doing some wonderful things.
You're based out of Dallas, Texas.
Based out of Dallas, Texas, yeah. The book was intended to take it to a different level, and I just partnered, for example, with the book with Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast.
Yeah, you know Mr. Beast, right?
I don't know him,
You
but
got
I can tell
kids,
you, my
so-
13-year-old, that's how I know of him.
Yeah,
and like
so-
with a name like Mr. Beast, my first inclination was like, huh, and then I realized how insanely successful the guy is, and
Wildly successful, yeah.
really a marketing genius, and so credit to him. But so you're partnered with him.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fear of social media and what are these guys doing? They're out there on TikTok. What are they telling my kids? Here's a guy with 260 million plus subscribers, and he created a whole arm called Beast Philanthropy, and they're drilling wells in Africa, and they're providing surgeries to people who need their macular degeneration fixed. And,
Sure.
I mean, all kinds of good stuff. Well, he was doing a program in a school in Atlanta. He brought 800 teachers in to help them learn the successful methods in this high school called the Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta. And so they reached out, and I worked with them. They knew I was working on the book and said, how'd you like to partner? So there's this beautiful video. Mr. Beast holds up my book, and he goes, read this book, put a video out telling us why education is freedom, and you can win one of 10 $10,000 scholarships.
Wow.
I now.
How many people did? I mean, it had to have been a big number.
Oh, yeah, it's huge.
because he's big. He's huge.
He's huge, but the best part is it was all over the world. So from every continent
Sure.
on the globe, I have these videos, and I tell you, they'll make you cry because they're these little 30,
check 'em
60
out
second
after.
videos. Yeah, and these kids are just pouring their hearts out, wanting to earn a scholarship, but they're saying, in their own words, online that they've posted on YouTube and TikTok, this is why education is important to me. I want to change my life.
Yeah, and he was originally like a gamer, right?
YouTuber. Yeah.
YouTuber?
Did a lot of
Alright.
games on YouTube.
Maybe that's what it is.
Little stunts
I'll
on
challenge
YouTube.
him to a battle in old school Halo. I think I've still got some skills in that game. But then
He might take you up on it.
yeah. But anyway, my son is like, he's like, Dad, Mr. Beast, this, Mr. Beast. And finally I was like, I got to look this guy up because like, he's clearly successful. But
Yeah, when you tell him I partnered with him, he's going to be like, why didn't you invite me to that podcast?
yeah, for sure. Hey, I'd love to have him on. Where is he based out of?
North Carolina.
Yeah, I'll gladly. I'll fly there. You'll pick me up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we'll fly down.
We'll do your gig in the air. And
Sure.
then we'll go there.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Deal.
All right. So what does the future look like for you? I mean, obviously you wrote this book. There's a lot of philanthropy. You're flying around the country, giving talks. What else?
Around the world.
Around the world. That's right. Yeah.
Kuwait this January.
You're going to
Dubai.
Kuwait? Yeah. I'll be in Dubai in about 10 days.
Awesome.
Yeah. Then India for a wedding for one of our guys here. So looking forward
Nice.
to that.
Nice. I'm heading to India next year to do it.
I've never been. I'm excited.
First quarter next year, I'll be there.
So traveling the world, is this your total focus? I mean, do you see yourself getting back in a traditional kind of corporate role, or?
I am always. I will characterize my path, I guess, as opportunistic, and this is what I've discovered. The more I learn, the more I can do. The more I do, the more opportunities open up, and so I'm keeping my options open. This is what I'm doing now. It's taken me all over the world, but it's also opening up new doors and new opportunities. So, would I ever take another CEO job? It would have to be a big, hairy, audacious challenge.
Oh, well, then I'll hand you the keys to Matthews, and then I'll just focus on being a YouTuber like Mr. Beast.
There you go.
Because like clearly there's a bigger market there. No, that's so you're open minded if the right opportunity presents itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what I'm doing, what I've discovered is that the more you do, the more doors open, the more opportunities open, and I'm just keeping my antenna up, and I know that every day is a new adventure for me now, and I'm anxious to see where this goes.
Looking back, and then it's a big general question, but you had the opportunity literally to manage hundreds of thousands of people, but let's say more as it related to people you interacted with and didn't have to be direct reports. But where I'm going with this is, and the question I want to ask is, on average, what in your experience did you find was the biggest reason people ultimately became successful professionally, right? And then what, conversely, was the most common or biggest reason that you felt prevented people from achieving the things that they thought they wanted?
One word: fear.
Fear.
Yeah, and it's so simple and it's pervasive. You can see it in individuals. You can see it in whole corporations. That corporations grow. You're going to have this challenge with Matthews. You get something called big company disease that creeps in, and you may not see it, but it'll be that.
I fight it every day.
You fight it every day, but
I walk by, I
creeps
see like a Teams call with like 13 people, and I go, what is this?
yeah.
Like, there's no, like, 2 people are engaged and 11 people are checked out. So, like, I just started a new rule: no Teams calls with more than 4 people.
Yeah.
Like, something as simple, because I'm like, this is how you become inefficient.
Exactly, and it happens. The spitballs will be flying. You'll have your back turned. You won't realize that somebody is out there trying
But
to
the
succeed.
spitballs, to be honest, I'm usually the one shooting literal spit. I mean, Matthews is a pretty loose play, so if I can hold on to the spitballs for a while, but no, metaphorically, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's that fear and the ability to overcome fear, the ability to control your reaction to change is, to me, what separates the winners from the losers, from the people that succeed. And there are people that look like they've succeeded. I've dealt with so many CEOs, major corporations. I could give you some names and would knock your socks off, and these people are terrified because they get to that job in some corporate environments by not taking risk, by not, giving into, being an entrepreneur. And then when
Not
they get
upsetting
there,
the apple cart.
right.
Yeah.
And then that corporation will be, often they're fine, but they muddle along at a pace that is far lower than what they could achieve if that CEO had the courage to step out.
And what advice, you've identified what, in your opinion, is the biggest reason why people don't achieve what they want? Like, how do you teach someone, or how do you tell someone, like, get over your fear?
Yeah.
See, it sounds easier said than done, though, right?
It does, but it's I think scientific. It is, the brain is a very powerful instrument, and most of us don't understand it. But it is reprogrammable. It is like a computer in that those synapses that are firing, those electric impulses, basically, that make us react, can be reprogrammed to react in a positive fashion. So a big part of it is awareness. And, if you go out to all these counseling sessions and, there's all kinds of ways that people deal with this, but you don't have to spend all that money and go through all those frou-frou experiences to recognize that you're in control of your own destiny and your own reactions to things. So I'll share with you a possible solution. I put this on the cover of my book, a picture of the world, the globe, on purpose. This represents, to me, perspective. And what perspective is what the astronauts, when they leave the planet, every one of them has a common response. Did you see William Shatner when he got off that Blue Origin flight, when he went into space for the first
I
time?
don't think so, but I think I know where you're going with this.
He was in tears. William Shatner, crusty, very experienced actor.
Star Trek.
Yeah, couldn't even speak hardly because he was so overwhelmed by what the astronauts call the overview effect, the world view. And it's this thing that I get in the cockpit at 41,000 feet. When I look at the planet, I can just barely see the curvature of the Earth.
Curvature.
You don't see borders. You don't see races. You don't see wars. You don't see problems. You don't see issues, pettiness. That's perspective, and that's what I've represented on the book. Perception is when you come back here to Earth and you turn on the social media and you see a meme and it makes you angry, and it may not even be true, but you are influenced by perceptions. And every single day we're all being led around by others based on perceptions. But it's in our control to be able to step back from those perceptions and create perspective for ourselves, which will, if we use the things I've talked about in the book, critical thinking, curiosity, creativity, all of those natural human elements that fight that amygdala portion of our brain that's causing us to react, then we can overcome our perceptions and live a life with a much broader perspective. And I think everybody will be happier individually, and collectively as a society, we'd be a hell of a lot better off.
What, you know, it summarized kind of what you talk about is, and again, getting back to the root causes, you know, fear, not overcoming fear, learning how to overcome fear. Are there any specific activities or practices or courses, or in addition to your book, Education is Freedom, are there things people can do to accelerate their ability to develop, accelerate people's ability to develop the ability to overcome fear?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I can do is buy the book, Education is Freedom, The Future is in Your Hands, on Amazon.com or any of these other places. But in all
do you have
seriousness,
audio too?
Yeah.
I always ask the question, did you do it?
I did it.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I did it. And I learned something. If you ever do an audiobook, don't skip breakfast. Because we're in a sound booth like this, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like,
you're hungry.
2 chapters in, my stomach's going.
Oh yeah.
And they had to
edit it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I always, you know, overcoming fear. I said, I'll tell you one good way is be on the kickoff team in college football. Like, and they're like, all right, you're gonna run down 40 yards, 50 yards full speed, and you're gonna hit that guy. And you're like, for real? Because it's not a natural thing, and don't trust anyone who plays football who doesn't have fear initially, because like there's not a lot going on in that guy's head. I was scared out of my mind. Now, I had to learn to overcome it. But short of like going and hitting people full speed, are there other ways they can, in addition to buying your book, learn how to say, okay, I have to develop the ability to overcome this damn fear that's keeping me from getting to where I want to go?
Yeah, the biggest thing is self-awareness, and there's lots and lots of ways that people can improve their self-awareness, but it's right now in society, if we just turn on the news, any channel, doesn't matter, we're going to see a fire hose of fear.
Yeah, I'm about to say, they're going to hit you with some fear.
Yeah, and we can practice. One of the simplest ways to practice is, how do we respond to that news? Do we just take it face value, or do we step back and go, oh, okay, I see where this news media channel is coming from and why they're saying that. Now, it doesn't mean I have to take the opposite and get mad at them, but maybe I want to balance 2 different media channels, hear what they both have to say, and use a chapter in the book, Critical Thinking, basic things we were taught in grade school, to be able to understand really what's the motivation behind that, and what's true and what's not true, to eliminate that perspective. I mean, to create that perspective, eliminate your perception.
Well, Jim, this has been awesome. Your story's inspiring. You know, obviously you've accomplished a lot, but you've overcome a lot, and you know, you've done a great job kind of marbling throughout the conversation. Amongst many things is education was your path out, right? You know, in a cliche statement there, but
it was.
So buy the book, Education is Freedom, The Future is in Your Hands, by Jim Keyes. Jim, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I look forward to hanging. I look forward to spending some time up in the air with you.
Yeah, let's go do a podcast.
Not that I don't trust you, but I would love to have a second pilot just to be safe. You know, we talked about that last night.
Yeah.
All right, Jim. Thank you. This was great.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.